And a hearty welcome to one and all. We're back in the car for episode 192 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for taking this ride with me here on this sunny Tuesday in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. So today is the 58th anniversary of the second fight between then undisputed world heavyweight champion Muhammad Ali and British Commonwealth champion, and also in his own right a fucking legend, Sir Henry Cooper, the only British fighter, boxer, sportsman of that ilk to ever be knighted by Queen Elizabeth. Henry Cooper was knighted in the year 2000, and while he got bestowed the status of Sir, he had his championship belts with him, and really fucking great picture of him smiling, and it just showed Henry Cooper was he was the king of boxing in England. He was a great fighter. And so May 21st, 1966 was, and it's kind of strange to think that these guys had already fought, but they had fought. And one of the great things about boxing, among many, I mean, the brutality is not great, guys getting permanently impaired and all that, bad. But when people talk about styles making fights and how it's very difficult to predict, and we just saw with Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk, I mean, Usyk is so much smaller than Tyson Fury, and even though Fury, past his prime or whatever, and Usyk is kind of getting up there, Tyson Fury had huge stretches of that fight where he seemed to be dominating, and Usyk seemed to be discouraged, hurting, running out of steam, and then the next thing you know, he just beats the hell out of him. You just don't know with boxing. So if we rewind the clock to the first fight in 1963 between, at the time, the heavyweight contender Cassius Clay and British Commonwealth champion and title contender Henry Cooper, Cassius Clay was Olympic champion. The future Muhammad Ali kind of cakewalked until the finals, and he had a tough match in the gold medal round of the 1960 Olympics. But he beat, it was the Polish fighter Pietrzakowski. He beat him. It was a clear decision. And in his professional career, he had it easy right up until he fought Doug Jones in, I think it was February of 1963, or maybe it was March of 1963. And Doug Jones was very tough. Yet another guy who in a different era would have been a light heavyweight wizard and potentially a cruiserweight, undersized for a heavyweight. But then the counter argument was when Cassius Clay fought Doug Jones, he was undersized for a heavyweight, which was true. I don't think he was even weighing 200 yet, or if he was just 200. So Cassius Clay and Doug Jones fought a fight which was fight of the year. It was 10 rounds, and at least 8 of those rounds were very difficult to score. And there were people who thought maybe Doug Jones eked out the decision, maybe. But looking back on it historically, the kid won the fight. And actually, if the fight had gone on further, he was starting to walk Doug Jones down, and Jones was getting tired, and the kid looked like he was gaining steam. So if it was a decision he could have lost, it was a fight that was very competitive, but not a bad decision. However, as Doug Jones himself said after the fight, hey, we see the kid, we know he's good, and he moves, and he clowns with the crowd, and they like him. And as Doug Jones said, I made more money because he's got a big mouth, so I got nothing bad to say about him. But if you're asking me, do I think he can take on Sonny Liston? No. He was implying that the heavyweight champion Sonny Liston, who had easily knocked out heavyweight champion and an all-timer in his own right, another undersized heavyweight, if we're being honest, Floyd Patterson, knocked him out in the first round twice. So tough fight for Cassius Clay against Doug Jones. And then he went to England to fight Henry Cooper, May 21, 1963. Excuse me, the Cooper fight in '63 was not May 21st. I don't know the actual date of that fight. It was later in the year. May 21st, '66 was the second fight. The first fight, Cassius was having his way with Henry. Henry was landing some shots, but Cassius was having his way. And Henry was starting to look like he was busted up around the eyes, and that was always a problem. Henry Cooper had the kind of skin, he cut easily, and Cassius Clay was really good at opening up cuts. Through those downward darts, he knew how to twist his punches to hurt his opponents. At the end of the third round, Henry Cooper landed a home run bomb and almost knocked Cassius Clay out of the ring. Needless to say, if he had knocked him out of the ring, he would have won the fight right there. That's the end of the fight. But Cassius Clay went down, and he went down, luckily for him, at the end of the round. He got up, Angelo Dundee pulled some chicanery in the corner, and by the time the fourth round started, Cassius Clay's head was clear, and he carved up Henry Cooper in the fourth round and stopped the fight. He ended the fight in the fourth round. Again, the cuts. Cooper's eye was a mess. But when I talk about styles making fights and the difficulty in predicting boxing, Cassius Clay has a tough fight with Doug Jones. He has a tougher fight with Henry Cooper. Then his next fight is against Sonny Liston for the World Heavyweight Championship. Well, I mean, if the guy struggled with Cooper, nearly got knocked out, struggled with Doug Jones, there were people saying, I think Doug eked out the decision. I think that was a 6-4 fight, 5-4-1. I think Doug won the decision. Well, how the fuck was the kid, regardless of his pedigree, Olympic champion, 23-0, or whatever his record was at the time, how the hell is he going to beat Sonny Liston? Sonny just knocked out Patterson twice, as if it was a sparring partner he was fucking with. Kid can't win. Well, that's not what happened. On February 25th, 1964, the future Muhammad Ali carved up Sonny Liston. He chopped him down. He fought a brilliant tactical fight and was a way better fighter than he looked to be in either the Doug Jones or the Henry Cooper fight. Or maybe he just was more focused. He was bigger. He was now up to 212. He looked more like a natural heavyweight than he had in those other fights, for whatever that's worth. And he walked down the fearsome Mike Tyson of his day, Sonny Liston, who people thought was still in his prime. And I don't know, maybe he was. Maybe young Cassius Clay was just too damn good for him. But he won the title, and then he beat Liston in the return match. That's the famous Phantom Punch. If you've seen that kind of iconic picture, it's one of the most famous pictures in the history of professional sports, or really the history, period. That picture of a young Muhammad Ali flexing, he's not really flexing, shouting at his opponent, that he is doing, but that was in the second fight with Liston. He knocked Liston down with a punch that he didn't think that he squared him up enough to knock down a guy as big and not known for having a glass jaw, Sonny Liston. But he took him out in the first round. Whether or not it was real, nobody knows to this day. Then he defended the title. He beat Floyd Patterson, very easy fight. And then he fought George Chuvalo. And for his next defense, he was overseas again because there was starting to be some rumblings about some issues with Vietnam, and he was going to be drafted, and there were indications that I am not going to be a tool for propaganda for the United States government. I'm not doing it. Fuck you. He didn't say fuck you. But there were starting to be rumblings that this situation with Vietnam wasn't going to go well. And they reclassified him so he could be drafted. So rather than fight the establishment at that point, the young champion took a show on the road and went overseas and signed to fight Henry Cooper again for his fourth title defense. And he was not, I know this is a cliche, but he wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. He was not going to sleep on just how powerful Henry Cooper, who was maybe 195 pounds, maybe he was 195. He wasn't going to sleep on him, and he was not going to take him for granted. Yes, he would still play to the crowd, but he was not going to open his mouth and clown, and he wasn't going to do anything like that to give Henry a chance to land another Sunday punch, or, as the Brits like to call Henry Cooper's powerful left hook, Henry's Amma. Henry's Amma. In the history of boxing, pound for pound, Henry Cooper had one of the greatest left hooks in the history of the sport. No question. Certainly as powerful as Bob Foster, who was a little bit smaller than him, and comparable with Joe Frazier's Sunday punch, home run bomb of a left hook that he threw. So on May 21st, 1966, Muhammad Ali and Henry Cooper met for the second time. And Ali won, I think he won each round in the fight. Henry landed some shots. But what they often say about knockout punches, or in the case of Henry Cooper in the first fight with the young Cassius Clay, now Muhammad Ali, it was a knockdown punch. But it was a punch that could have tilted the fight in his favor. If he had another 30 seconds in the round, maybe he could have finished him. We don't know. That's the unknown, and that's also the kind of historical magic of Ali, that home run bomb ended up as the round was ending, and not with a minute left or 30 seconds left. And then in the Sonny Liston, the first fight, where he was blind going into the fifth round, how did he survive? He survived through something approaching magic, because he should have been stopped. And Liston is winging, and the kid couldn't see, and he's moving around, and he's fucking around. He's trying to tie Liston up, and somehow he survives long enough, even though Liston did square him up. But we know he could really take a hell of a shot. He survived that through what appeared to be some kind of magic, that he got out of that and won that fight. But he wasn't going to sleep on Henry again. He knew how dangerous it was, and the guys liked each other. That's the thing. There were certain fights in that era where Ali's opponent didn't like him. He was a loudmouth. I'm going to shut him up. Cooper got a big kick out of him. And also, as Doug Jones begrudgingly said, you make more money with this kid because he talks so much. And Cooper loved the fact that he was getting a big payday. So the second fight, if we're being honest, was not really as exciting as the first. But this particular stretch, this fight, would have to be considered when the young champion was at his physical peak. And it's not necessarily the best representation of his skills. I would say that the best representation of his skills were in the Cleveland Williams fight, which was next. The Mildenberger fight, Mildenberger landed some big shots, especially to the body. Nobody likes getting hit. Nobody likes getting hit in the stomach. Nobody likes getting hit in the side. You get hit in a sweet spot, you end up on the ground, and maybe the fight's over. But he wasn't going to sleep on him this time. And the fight was not as competitive and is not as compelling as the first one. Ali won it going away. I think he won every round. And then in the sixth round, Henry's eye was just too horrendously carved up for him to continue. And you don't want to deprive a challenger, or a champion for that matter, of an opportunity. But sometimes a cut is so bad, the ref just has to stop the fight. And we saw it many years later, 20 years ago now, when Lennox Lewis and Vitaly Klitschko were having a fantastic clash, where Lennox was on the receiving end and he showed a lot of grit and toughness. He was getting the shit kicked out of him early in the fight. He fought back, and he opened up a cut that it looked like Vitaly could die. Not to get ghastly, but they had to stop that fight. And if you see the footage, I'm probably going to attach to the front of this, you see, or even a picture of what Henry Cooper's eye looked like when they stopped the fight, and he was angry, but they had to stop the fight. The guy could have, if somebody is spurting blood and the cut appears to be very deep, it's a boxing match. And Mike Tyson has talked about the fact that, I used to say I was the baddest man on the planet, but we're not out there to die. We can talk tough, but nobody's out there looking to die in the ring. And then he said, guys like Joe Frazier and Ali, yeah, they were ready to go. I wasn't. And Henry Cooper, if that fight had continued, could have been in significant jeopardy. And it's the same at the ending of the first fight, which is that the cut was really vicious. It was nasty. And at that time, it was spurting blood as the fight was stopped. And although Henry protested, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You got to protect. You have to protect the fighters. You can't just assume, he's going to be fine or anything like that. You have to, the ref has to do a job. And we saw it with Tyson Fury and Usyk over the weekend. The referee took a lot of criticism because should it have been a knockdown? Should Usyk have been able to try to finish him? every referee handles the kind of crisis moments and the sort of decision points in big fights differently, just as every referee has a different cadence when a fighter is dropped. And some of the controversy over the weekend, people were remembering the first fight with Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, where the referee, they said, well, he kind of had a slow count. We heard the same thing many, many years ago when Buster Douglas was dropped by Tyson. Tyson's one great moment in that fight when he knocked Buster down. And they said, well, Octavio Meyran, the official, he gave him a long count. But that's the thing. Every ref has a different cadence. They don't all go with a faster count. Conversely, now almost 50 years ago, Zach Clayton standing over George Foreman in Zaire after Ali kind of knocked Foreman off balance more than anything else. And George is up at 8. And Zach Clayton is waving the fight over as if he's reached 10, but George is on his feet. And Zach is waving the fight over. That fight really was over. But Zach Clayton was a guy with a fast count. Octavio Meyran, for example, was a ref who had a slower cadence. Steve Smoger, another guy with a slower cadence. It's not illegal. It doesn't say 10 seconds. It's a 10 count. But in the case of a guy's eye getting busted up, I don't think any referee in history would have allowed either of the two fights between Ali and Henry Cooper to continue much longer than they did. Nobody's trying to get anybody killed out there. It's rough enough, like the Ruelas-Garcia fight, I think in 1995, where Mitch Halpern, who ended up refereeing and I think did a terrific job in the first Tyson Holyfield fight, but Mitch Halpern never forgave himself for that. I think it was a Garcia pass that they let the fight go on too long. You got to be careful. We remember Emile Griffith, Benny Perret, all those years ago. I think it was Ruby Goldstein, who was an extraordinary official. But bad things can happen. And when somebody's busted up and their eye is gushing blood, you got to stop the fight. So Ali won that fight, and then he ended up defending his title. He didn't fight Patterson again until later in his career. But he fought Brian London, and he fought Cleveland Williams, and Ernie Terrell, and finally Zora Foley. He made a total of 9 successful title defenses. I forgot to mention Mildenberger in the first go around. He fought Mildenberger. I think it was September of '65. It could have been a little bit later than that. But his best fights in terms of the kind of otherworldly skill level that he had, this is one of them, because Henry came to fight and he really didn't have a chance. And Cooper afterwards even said, I don't even know how this is possible, but the kid, he was bigger and he was faster. How does that happen? And he was kind of joking, but he was kind of not joking. He said, I feel like even if I had hit him this time, it wouldn't, I don't think I could have knocked him down. He looked like he was 15 pounds bigger. So, generally speaking, Ali's finest, not his finest performance. So like if you had to grade Ali, and I am wearing my Ali shirt, this was when he was getting ready to fight Ernie Terrell, which was his 8th of 9 title defenses. That was actually, we talk about, as we say, Alexander Usyk and Tyson Fury. That was a unification fight for the lineal championship. Ali and Ernie Terrell, not that long after he fought Henry Cooper, that was a unification fight. Both guys were champs. Terrell was not really the champ. The WBA had already stripped the title from Ali. I don't know why, because they didn't like some of the stuff he was saying about religion, I guess. Because the Vietnam scenario, I don't think that he was going to get stripped from the title. They were not yet going to strip the title from him, would be more accurate. But Ernie Terrell had become the WBA champion, and that was a unification fight. This particular shirt is representing the lead up to that fight. But if you had to say, with Ali, if you broke it down into what was his most skillful performance, what was his finest fighting, and what was his finest hour? His finest fighting, the masterclass, if you will, was the first fight with Liston. It was a masterclass, not just showing off the otherworldly skill level, but it was a masterclass of neutralizing neutralizing a legitimate all-time great, making Sonny Liston more or less look like a sparring partner. It's really an extraordinary performance. The best representation of his skills when they were at their peak is the Cleveland Williams fight, where he boxed circles around Cleveland, who was a big dude who could punch. He was well past his prime, but he was a big guy who could punch. And no contest. By the end of the second round, I mean, they should have stopped the fight after 2 when Williams had to be helped back to his corner. You could be saved by the bell in that fight. And Williams, the fight was going to be over, and his corner literally dragged him, I'm not exaggerating, dragged him back to his corner, and the fight continued. His finest hour, probably the Rumble in the Jungle with Foreman, because nobody gave him a chance to win that. Some people would say Thrilla in Manila, the fight with Frazier the next year, but that was just an attrition battle. Maybe the greatest professional fight in the history of boxing. The two guys both wanted it so bad. They were as much fighting for the championship of each other in their third tilt than for Ali's, heavyweight title. But generally speaking, as I say, because none of this is absolute, these are subjective opinions. There are people who might point to the Zora Foley fight, because Foley was such a crafty, such a clever boxer, another undersized heavyweight, that would say, no, that's a beautiful representation of his skills, because he made Foley look like he didn't even belong in the ring with him. As tough and crafty and smart and skilled defensively as Zora Foley was, Ali just ran him off his feet. He just blasted him out of there. Never had a chance. Most people will point to the Williams fight. Joe Rogan has talked about it a lot on his podcast. That's one of his favorite fights to kind of break down, because to just see this guy at 215 pounds, single digits body fat, not looking like a bodybuilder, but looking like a guy who worked with his hands, worked with his body for a living, which he did, because he built himself up about 35 to 40 pounds from the Olympics forward. Didn't really do any weight training, medicine ball work, hitting the heavy bag, and just kind of growing up and filling out like a normal person. He's just almost looked like a Mack truck. And when you saw him in the ring as a kid, his opponents were usually bigger. And then by the time he's facing off with a huge man in Ernie Terrell, yeah, Terrell's bigger, but he didn't have to take a back seat to Terrell, and he's just blasting away. And the Zora Foley fight, every time he squared up Foley, he did damage. He could hit. He wasn't known as a tremendous hitter, and certainly there were no points in either fight with Cooper where it looked like Cooper was on the verge of going down, even though Ali was, a bigger man than Cooper in either fight. He outweighed him both times, I believe. Certainly the second time for sure. The second fight, though, between Ali and Cooper, a great representation of the skills of probably the most talented fighter to ever fight in a heavyweight division. Now, you can argue that Joe Louis was the single greatest heavyweight ever. In most informal polls over the last, decades, 30, 40 years, most polls will rank Ali as the greatest heavyweight because he fought at a time when it was the greatest quality of opposition, and that's not insignificant. The 70s and to some extent the 60s had a lot of championship level fighters who just never ended up winning a championship. By the time you get into the 80s, there weren't as many. There were still huge talents, Mike Tyson, obviously, and there were talented guys that never won the title or the lineal title, guys like Tim Witherspoon, and even guys like him. But then there were champions who weren't really that great. John Tate was a big dude. Mike Weaver, tough guy. They really would not have been champions if they had come around 5 years earlier. The last kind of big time guy of the 70s that made it big was Larry Holmes, who was Ali's sparring partner for a number of years. The idea, though, is that this is all subjective. But what isn't subjective is that when Ali was in his prime, he didn't lose. He defended his title successfully 9 times. And the only fight of those 9 in which he was even really challenged was the Mildenberger fight, which was, as I say, before Henry Cooper. And the Mildenberger fight, I always get mixed up. I'm not sure if it was before or after Henry Cooper. Is it 65 or 66? See? Even I slip up sometimes. But Mildenberger may have taken a round or 2 out of the 10. Maybe. But even that, Joe Louis doing the commentary, he says, nah, champ won every round. Yeah, you want to give Mildenberger a round, fine. I think he won every round. And then when he fought Ernie Terrell, two of the judges had him pitching a 15-round shutout, which is absurd, given that he was going against another heavyweight champion, but pitched a shutout, and I think the referee had 1 round for Ernie Terrell in that fight. And after he fought Zora Foley in the Garden in, was it March of 67, I think? Maybe it was April. That was it. His 3.5-year exile period commenced after that fight, and that's a story for another day, and his second career is also a story for another day. But May 21st, 1966, one of the 9 title defenses of Prime Ali, still easily one of the great top fighting forces in the history of boxing. Nobody would rank 60s Ali less than like 5th if you're saying greatest fighters who ever lived in their prime. He's going to appear on almost everyone's list. You know, even Floyd Mayweather is kind of a crank sometimes. Would put him in the top 5 pound for pound when he was at his peak. And many people would put him in the top 2, with Sugar Ray Robinson being first. May 21st, 1966, undefeated world heavyweight champion Muhammad Ali defeated Sir Henry Cooper for the second time in 3 years, both times stopping Sir Henry on cuts. This has been episode 192 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you for joining me on this boxing reverie on this warm Tuesday in New York. And if you caught this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, enjoy the content, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you caught this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.